18th of June, 2004. My name is Rick Lindsay. I'm with the World War II Pacific Theater Project. We're at the Plaza Hotel in Salt Lake City, right across the street from the LDS Temple Square.
Right.
And you're here for a reunion. And
Our last.
Your last reunion.
Yes, it's the last reunion this organization will have. We don't have enough people.
Tell me your name and the name of the organization.
My name is Robert Fillet, F-I-L-L-E-T. And the organization is the 7th Bomb Group, which was originated initially in California and then on to Salt Lake City and then overseas. As a bomb group, they originally flew B-17s. And part of the group, the 9th Squadron, were the 17s that were landing in Pearl Harbor the day of the Japanese decision to go to war,
Right.
December 7th.
You were born where and when?
I was born in New York in November 29th, 1921, and I went to school there, grew up mostly in New York City.
What part of New York City?
89th and Park. Actually, it was 56 East 89th Street, and then we moved to 1095 Park Avenue. And I attended Dwight Preparatory School. One of my out-of-school activities was to be a member of the National Guard. And I joined the 7th Regiment, New York National Guard. This is their symbol. And they were federalized, we were federalized in 1941 in anticipation of the war. And they went to Camp Smith. I say they because I requested an opportunity to resign in favor of going into what was then flying cadets. And so long as you were willing to go into another part of the service, nobody objected. And my dad was a aircraft mechanic in World War I, a specialist on the OX-5 engine, which is a rather unique property. It's the only engine ever devised and used that the engine spun with the fixed propeller around the shaft that was attached to the airplane. All other engines are just the opposite. The engine is fixed to the aircraft, and the drive shaft drives the propeller. Anyway, it's a very interesting engine. They have an excellent exhibition of it at the Air Museum in San Diego. So I went, applied for and got into what was then flying cadets and later became aviation cadets. And I went through the schooling. Monroe, Louisiana was my first assignment. I graduated a little too high in the class roster. I really wanted to do what I was trained to do, which is fight. And instead they decided that I would make a very good instructor. So they sent me to Selman Field, Monroe, Louisiana, which I was the original group that flew the school into that base. And I also then, since I was a air chauffeur for these navigators, I was too bored just to do that, and so I also applied for and got my navigation rating. So, and then I eventually applied for overseas duty. And
That's about when?
That was about the early part of 42. Right after, well, shortly after Pearl Harbor, I graduated.
Now let's back up just a little
Yeah.
bit with Pearl Harbor now.
Okay.
Where were you when the war broke
I was in primary school in Florida, and it's a fun.
Whereabouts?
Avon Park, Florida. It's a little bitty field right in the middle of orange groves. And everybody got excited about we were attacked by the Japanese, and the commanding officer ordered all cadets to be issued rifles and ammunition. And we were sent out on the air base to protect these wonderful 220 horsepower Stearmans, training planes. It was an experience in itself because, you know, somebody would see a flicker of light, and the next thing you know, it'd be rifle shots all over the place. And, I felt the smartest thing I could do is lie down. Anyway, that was December 7th for us. And I eventually graduated with my wings from Columbus, Mississippi Air Base, and then sent on to Monroe. After the tour in Monroe was completed, I was asked if I wanted to go overseas, would I object to special training? And they said no. I said no. And so I was sent to Corpus Christi, Texas, to the Naval Air Station, where they trained me into land boats, what was then the PBY. And the Army designation of that ship for the amphibious model was OA-10. And what they were doing is training me to do air sea rescue. And and then I was sent over to the Ferry Command in Memphis, Tennessee, to await aircraft assignment. And during that period of time, they would give me a manual on an airplane I'd never been in. I would study it overnight. I would do a blindfold test, which means that you blindfold and have to identify where everything is. You didn't want to fly that thing unless you could find everything. And then I would fly it to wherever I was told to fly it. In some cases, I would fly it, a used beat-up B-26, I would fly it to an air mechanics school where they dismantle the thing and teach mechanics how to do their mechanic thing. And I got a chance to finally get over to Scotland, Ireland. We just drop planes off and then they'd fly us back, a group of us back. So I finally got my PBY 5A.
Any incidents flying over there to?
Not really. No. The only thing that I began to have a real appreciation of, and for the first time knew, that women were flying in the Ferry Command. And they were doing just the same job I was doing, and doing it just as well, and perhaps even better. But that was the only thing that stands out in my mind as being unique, other than doing the work I was assigned to do. And then my ships came in. I got a co-pilot by the name of Prince. He was a short-order cook in the civilian world. Before I left Monroe, I was asked by the commander who I wanted to choose for a navigator. And I said, I will take the navigator that came out top in his class, whoever it was. I didn't know his name or who he would be. And so Louis Schwartz was assigned to me as my navigator. And he later became a roommate. So we got this PBY, and here again was a brand new ship that I'd never seen, but I had a lot of experience by this time. I had close to 1,200 hours, which was a lot. Well, I flew a lot.
Well, yeah, that was. I mean, because some pilots flying into combat missions And sometimes only had, what, 500 hours?
That's right, but they had it in the plane they were flying.
Correct.
Whereas my training was so broad, and my use, the use of me as a pilot was so broad, that I didn't have a great focus in anything other than that training plane I was flying down in Monroe, which is a twin beach. Anyway, I got this airplane. Prince came in. I met him for the first time, and we started.
Prince? And
Was my
Schwartz.
co-pilot. Lou Schwartz was my navigator, and
Prince
Prince was my co-pilot. And I decided the best place to train would be Lake Okeechobee down in Florida. And since our orders to take the plane overseas took us through Florida, it seemed very logical to do that. So I spent about 2 weeks there really getting to know the ship and understanding the vagaries of landing this amphibian in a lake. The boats that I learned on didn't have the amphibian capability. They were straight boats. And so there were some differences between what I'd been trained in and what I now was flying. Anyway, we got to Lake Okeechobee and we flew that, and then started our trek to go overseas. Our first stop was in Cuba. Well, the base, Guantanamo. And unfortunately, my short order co-pilot cooked some pork chops, and mine were a little too rare, and I became extremely ill on that base. And finally I got taken to the hospital, and after 2 days of feeding me intravenously, it was just a trichinosis. Is that the right word? I don't know. Okay. Anyway, that's what I had, and got better, and we got back in the plane, and we went down to Belém, Brazil, in South America, where the famous boots. It seems like all the pilots, all the air crew used to get these short boots in Belém. They were handmade down there and very inexpensive. So, and then we went further south in Brazil to where it juts out into the Atlantic Ocean, and took off for the Azores, the islands, where I again landed for refueling. Then from the Azores, I went to Accra in Africa, and we needed a rest. We couldn't continue flying, so we took a couple of days off and rested up, at which time I had an interesting experience. I got to meet one of the RAF guys that were at the base, and he told me about buying furniture, that you could buy the most magnificent furniture from the local prison. And because these prisoners was the only way they would be able to make any money. So they had the most gorgeous mahoganies, and they hand rubbed them till they shone like a mirror. They were just so beautiful. I bought a small end table with a good deal of hope that it could eventually be shipped and sent to my home. Addressed it to my mother, and went across Africa, then into Algiers, where we took another day off and had something fixed on the airplane. And then the next stop.
So when is this again?
This is in the end of, beginning of 43.
Okay.
Landed at an airport in Gulf of Aden. And there the plane needed a lot of help, so it was down for about 4 days. During that time, I requisitioned a Jeep and went into town with the admonition of the operations officer, which is don't leave the main roads. The Arabs are not that friendly. And so even back then,
No change, huh?
no, not a lot, apparently. Anyway, after one visit into town and trying to find something to eat that wasn't laden with flies, I figured I'd just as soon go back and eat the food at the base. Anyway, my orders were to join the CBI headquarters in Agra, India. And so went on to Karachi, and from Karachi went over to Agra. We got to Agra, again we had some repairs to do, so the plane was down for about 3 days. And
Typical of those, of the PBYs?
well, no, it was typical of this ship, and you'll later hear why. It's odd, but it is strange. What happened there was that I was looking for the unit to report to, and everybody I asked said they went to Calcutta. So here I am in Agra. Oh, okay. I eventually got back in the plane, went to Calcutta, and reported in, and I was their new SE Rescue unit. We had 3 planes. Unfortunately, the planes were manufactured by the Canadians, who modified the Consolidated Aircraft Company's plans, which normally had a double hull for landing in the sea. But in Canada, they're mostly lakes. There aren't sea. So they didn't feel a big need for a double hull. And the guys there said, you don't want to land in the Bay of Bengal with a single hull. I said, well, I'm going to try it. So I got Lou Schwartz to sharpen up a whole bunch of pencils. And we took off and we landed on the Bay of Bengal, and sure enough, the rivets started popping, and he would just take those pencils and shove it down in the hull. And it was obvious that we weren't going to go very far rescuing anybody with these ships. And so the RAF told us that we could get the hulls repaired, fixed properly, if we sent the ships down to Durban, South Africa. And so that's what we did. We flew them down there.
Can you hang on a second?
Yeah.
Okay. We are back. So
Okay.
we flew the plane down
To Durban, which, by the way, was an absolutely magnificent city. It was not as populated, nearly as populated as it is today. And every street had an island of garden and flowers in the middle. It was just beautiful. I wasn't quite used to seeing cities that way. But anyway, I was flown back to Calcutta and said, I'll have to just sit around till they're done with their work. They said, oh no, we need pilots desperately up at the 7th Bomb Group. So we're going to send you up there, and Prince and Lou Schwartz and yourself can go up there. So I reported in to the headquarters. They sent me over the 492nd Squadron, and that's when I joined the 7th Bomb Group. And
what's your feeling about this? You think, oh boy, or do you think you have a little trepidation there, or what?
well, I'd never flown a B-24 before. As a matter of fact, I'd never even flown in one. And and they had a very heavy schedule. So there wasn't much time for learning anything. You just had to do it. And so I would go out on combat missions as a co-pilot, in spite of the fact I had more hours than perhaps the pilot, but he had more technology about that airplane. And, of course, it is their policy at the time, and a very good policy, I might add, that even though you might be capable technically with the airplane, flying combat's not quite the same. So everybody that came in as a new pilot was given the opportunity to fly as co-pilot until they were seasoned into the various missions. Then I had a whole flock of missions. I think it was about 28 of them, over and into Burma. I flew what was then the longest mission ever flown by anyone, 17 and a half hours down to Sumatra to bust up some of their oil refinery storage and refinery stuff.
So what was that like, that particular mission?
Well,
Are we getting ahead or?
yeah, I think we are. Actually, the thing that I thought was interesting was that everybody, particularly my pilot, told me when the lights get on you, don't stick your head into the bubble to look down because they'll blind you. The lights are so strong, even though you're up at 6, 8, 10,000 feet. Those aircraft lights were strong. And intellectually, I heard them. But my curiosity got the best of me, and I was blinded for a while.
Now, is this just night blindness? I mean, so you
Well, I should tell you that most of our flights were at night. A good many of them were at night, not most. That's not accurate. The ones that were at night, and if they were in particular over a very rough target, my initial flights were over a very rough target. We had a target called Rangoon, and it was the most heavily defended target that we experienced in the theater. And so we had to go, we went back 4 times till we completed the destruction that was ordered.
What was your target?
Well, on one, we dropped mines in the harbor. On another, we dropped bombs on bridge facilities and other ship facilities. And I think we did that twice in a row. And then we went after some heavy shipping, because that was the port that fed the Japanese army that was fighting up into Burma. And so we did all of these missions, and then we would do other targets of opportunity or assigned targets, depending upon what the assignment was. And a good many books and pictures in there of those very raids that we were on. And maybe I'm jumping ahead of myself, but then...
you can back up anytime.
Okay. This was now the end of 44. And
are you a pilot or still co-pilot?
by then I'm, oh yeah, since I'm a pilot, first pilot.
So how many missions would you fly as a co? In the right seat.
Yeah, I would say maybe 4 to 6 would be the norm. Actually, it would be dependent on what the pilot said about you. You see, when you get done with a mission, they had a setup of like card tables, and at each card table would be a different activity. One would be to debrief you on what happened, what did you see, what do you remember. Another would be, how do you feel? If you can't sleep, take these. And if you can't get awake, take these. And if you want both, you can have them. And there was another table with whiskey. And you had these canteen cups, metal canteen cups, and as much as you want, you could have. Nice bar, no charge.
What was the purpose of that?
Oh, a lot of fellows would come in very tight from flying, tired and tight. And it was a way to just kind of turn off, relax a little bit. As I say, you could have as much of that whiskey as you wanted, and nobody really jumped into it too much.
They had the 4 card tables.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think there was another, but I don't recall what it was for. But anyway, you'd go through this routine, and
Can I back up just a little bit?
certainly, sure.
You're talking about, say, a trip over Rangoon. You say that was one of the most, if not the most, heavily defended target that you would fly over.
Correct.
Can you describe that for me? What would you experience?
Well, the first thing I have to tell you is that we were very, very light on the number of aircraft and pilots. As a matter of fact, we had only one heavy bombardment group in the theater in India and one in China. So that meant you had 4 squadrons, 4 active squadrons. And
A squadron is how many planes?
well, to get them to fly will be between 3 and 4 planes on a mission. So at most that we'd ever go up with is 16 planes. We used to read about these 1,000-plane raids over Germany and stuff, but we never saw anything like that. It's totally different. And in view of the fact that they were such long distances and we didn't have, therefore, fighter cover, we would frequently go in individually. Sometimes in formation, but mostly individually. And the experience is as you approach the target, they knew you were coming. Well, first of all, I should say that your excitement starts when you cross the bomb line. This is just over the Bay of Bengal, nothing but water there. And you have to fire off all your guns to be sure they work. So you don't do that until you cross the bomb line. And that gets the excitement and the adrenaline going. And then as you approach the target, if they're heavily defended like Rangoon was, they'd know you're coming. And they greet you with anti-aircraft as best they can. And that's the nervous part of the flight, because as a bomber, you have an obligation. The obligation is to the bombardier. You have to keep that plane straight and level so that he can sight the target and then drop his bombs on the target. That could be roughly a 3-minute to 5-minute activity. Well, when somebody's shooting any aircraft at you and keeping and knowing that you can't change anything. So,
Back up. So,
yeah.
So,
your job
you're
is,
saying knowing that you can't change anything.
you can't change anything. I mean, it's your job to give the bombardier a solid platform from which he will bomb. You don't want to make that whole flight, take all those risks and not hit the target. So it's a severe obligation. And that's the scary part of flying combat from a bomber's perspective. Sometimes we would get attacked by fighters, Japanese fighters. There were many more Japanese naval fighters than there were land-based. Um, but approaching the target, your plane would get buffeted so long as it's not hit. If it's hit, that's another story. But even the close ones will make the ride unsmooth, and the bombardier yelling in your ear that, to hold it down. There was later, there was a connection between the autopilot and the bomb sight. When they put in the Norden bomb sight, it took over the plane. So, the sight flew the airplane for that last 3 to 5 minutes. So you just didn't have a control over it. However, the minute you'd hear bombs away, you'd move that, get that thing out of there as if it were an acrobatic plane, as best you can. So
bombs away basically meant, okay, the bombs were all gone now. They were away from.
Yeah, they toggle them. They toggle them out. You open the bomb bay doors.
How much was that? Just a switch, I assume, opening the bomb bay doors.
Yes, it's an electrical switch. That's correct. I'm saying electrical. I'm not even sure of that. It might have been hydraulic. I don't recall. And then the bombardier, who's out in the bombardier's station at the nose, is jiggling his sight and trying to get the target in the crosshairs. The minute when he throws a toggle, he has the ability to release one bomb at a time, which we did sometimes where we were putting in mines and things like that. But when you're on a bombing run, such as Rangoon, he put the target in the sights and would throw the toggle switch, and it would just bam, 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 and they'd all go in succession. And
How many bombs would you be carrying? What weight?
The smallest size we carried were 500-pounders. We carried, and that's why the B-24 was a wonderful airplane. It could carry more armament than anybody else. So we could and did carry 2,000 pounds. The only thing that was lighter were the things that catch fire and incendiaries. Incendiary bomb. The front of it opens up and it spins, and when it spins from the vanes on the top of it, it releases all of these that look like bomblets, and they go out over every place, and you couldn't put them out. In other words, if the Japanese were throwing water on them, that would just get them going better. So that's why they burned up half of Tokyo. We'd pass the bomb thing, and frequently, if we were deep into Rangoon, we would encounter fighter aircraft, Japanese fighter aircraft on the way home. I mean, on the way away from the target. And we were lucky in that we expanded our fighter cover, which we most frequently didn't have, but we got some of it from a new squadron of P-38s that was brought into the theater. They had the longest range of any fighter at the time, so we were very happy to see them. I'm beginning to think of the last flight I had with the 492nd. We were obligated and starting a new operation, and it was to carry bombs and ammunition and fuel to China and stack up enough of it so that we could run our bombing runs out of China. It would take about 2 flights ordinary flights go over and come back. And
Over what they call the hump.
over the hump, right. And because they were non-combat missions, which is a joke, they frequently would team together two pilots. In other words, one guy would be the pilot going out, the other guy would be co-pilot, and then coming back from China, they'd switch seats. So my first flight to China to do that, I was flying co-pilot. And we were over Burma, and had not yet hit the Himalayas. We're just about to approach them when I heard like pebbles on a tin roof. You know, that kind of that light sound. I heard that. It didn't mean anything to me, and I just kept flying along, but all of a sudden I began to realize that the spigot on the 100-octane fuel tank that we were carrying it was gone, shot away, or it was gone. And the plane was flooding with 100-octane fuel. So the pilot hit the silk thing, and we all jumped. He went to the rear of the ship to check out and see that everybody had gone from the rear of the ship. I went underneath to the bombardier's place to see that he got out. And
Okay, so no one's flying the plane right now.
oh, the plane is put on autopilot.
Okay. You say, okay, hold straight and steady, whatever you can. They're just little.
That's it. It doesn't do anything. You know, autopilot will just go until you change something. And so we were flying nice and steady. And as I say, he jumped down, went past the gasoline flow to the back. I went up forward and underneath to get to the bombardiers to see to it that he had gone out. And he had gone out. So I came back to see that the navigator and the top gunner were gone. And then I went to the initial bomb bay and jumped. Unfortunately, I hit my head on the ship as I was leaving, so I was knocked out. I woke up, and it was a very pleasant, wonderful feeling of just floating. No feeling of dropping. I was very surprised about all of that. But anyway,
In other words, you pulled the.
I pulled the ripcord.
As you were going out.
No. After I was awakened,
After you were.
after I woke up, because I was knocked out.
Okay.
But I wasn't knocked out for long.
I'm messing up your story.
No, that's okay.
Tell me again. Okay, so you
All right.
decided time to get out.
So we all decided time to get out. We have 8-man crew at that point, and we wanted to be sure that everybody else, you know, didn't just hear the thing and ignore it, but they got out. So that's why the pilot went to the back of the ship to check that everybody got out.
Tell me, you say the signal, the silk thing. What was the signal to everyone? Because
Oh.
I wasn't knowing that you were just talking to everyone.
Oh no! That you have a bell,
An alarm.
alarm, and a big alarm button. You hit that alarm button, and the sound goes nuts, and that's the signal for everybody to get out. This isn't the kind of thing where you can consult with everybody. When you make decisions as a combat pilot, those are the decisions you're going to live or die with, and you're going to do it instantly. So you have to think fast and think well if you want to stay alive. And so, as I say, I went to the front of the ship to be sure that those people that I had the responsibility to see got out. He went to the back of the ship to see if those people got out. And when I left, I hit my head on the ship. So I was kind of knocked out, opened my skull. I was bleeding a little bit, but nothing of substance. And
About what altitude were you at?
We were about 4 to 5,000 feet. You weren't very high. As I say, we were beginning to approach the mountains, and we didn't go up that high. Remember, you didn't have it. It got cold up there. You lose 1 degree of centigrade for every 1,000 feet you go up. So it's very quickly you can get into very cold weather. And since we knew we would have enough cold weather time flying over the mountains, we stayed reasonably low. So having jumped, I woke up with noticing that the horizon was right on my toes. So my toes were on the horizon. I was kind of flat like that and just falling. And I pulled the ripcord, and when I did, I spun. When the parachute opened, it spun me. I don't know why or how. I can conclude that maybe it wasn't packed exactly right. That may have been it. I don't know. But I was...
Were you coming down on your... facing down or facing up?
Facing up.
You're facing up.
Facing up, pulled the ripcord, and jerked into reality by this, the chute opening and spinning me. Anyway, that settled down. I didn't have any problem from that point on, and came down into water. I saw that we were going to land in the water. And what this was that the rice fields and the water in monsoon time get flooded. They will range anywhere from 10 to 15 feet deep of water, which isn't an awful lot. It's enough to drown in, however. And when you come down in a parachute, you're swinging all the time. You're coming down swinging. Well, I'd been instructed in cadet training that if I was going to parachute into water, to release the straps on my thighs and release the one up here and just hang in there. And then when you got real close to the water, just put your hands up like that and drop into it. Well, it's a great theory, but that water comes up so much faster than you could possibly anticipate. You know, the last part, and we've never had any training in the use of a parachute of any kind, other than if you need it, pull it. So you're swinging. If you land in the water and your swing is such that you're downwind, meaning that canopy comes down over you and it meshes you in the... Everybody got out of the plane. There are only 3 of us that lived through it. All the rest drowned. In other words, hey, there she is.
Can we set you winging?
Yeah, so you're coming down, and you're actually, I noticed that I was coming down a lot faster than I thought I would, and I hit the water very fast. And I was just lucky, pure luck. I hit the water the right way. The guys that didn't make it. When I hit the water, it was like a planing. You know, it just pulled me along until I could get out of it, disconnect, get rid of my shoes and stuff like that. And I was wearing a flight suit, very much like what I've got on right now. And I started to tread water. I didn't have any idea where I really was. I mean, as far as where is shore, where is land. And so I just kept swimming and swimming, hoping that the people who may have seen... Oh, I neglected to tell you, I got to go back. When I got out of the ship and woke up, I saw my airplane. I saw it flying almost in front of me, not near me, but I could see it. And I could even remember my plane was an unpainted plane. It was the first plane that our squadron got that had a turret front. All the previous model D models only had 130 caliber mounted in the nose. And the Japanese approach was to come head on and fire at you with all of their guns. And since you had a top or a ball turret, but they couldn't converge as a front turret would do. And so that was how they did things. They came at you this way, got over in their back and did a split S down to come up and shoot you under the belly if they missed you the first time. So that was their tactic.
You see the plane.
I see the plane. This is just after I woke up from getting smacked in the head. And I was looking around, but I saw the plane and it blew up. And, you know, I just thank God we got out. And anyway, I'm landed in water. And I couldn't touch anything. So it was deeper than I was. And when I was a lot younger, I went to summer camp, and they taught me junior life saving, how to survive without being able to use your hands. You know, how to float without using your hands. And that came in handy. I floated or tread water, really is a better way to say it. I treaded water for about 2 hours. I'm not sure of that. How long? It seemed like 2 months or 2 weeks. It didn't seem like a couple hours. But after a while, I just assumed that the only thing I could do is stay alive. And the only way to do that was to float or to tread water and hope that whoever saw me come down would come to rescue me and that they would not be Japanese. So after a while, along comes a dugout canoe with two natives in the canoe. And they were talking and picked me up. And I gathered in my parachute because you're supposed to bring your parachute home, which is silly. But anyway, they put me in this thing and took me to their village. Now, in flood, the villages become islands because they're built as villages because they're on a little higher piece of land. But they're all disconnected. There's no connection from one island to another. And so they brought me to this island, and everything was great. There were no Japanese there. They had also picked up one of my crew members and brought his body in and told me that there were one more crew member that they knew about was being picked up, and that they're going to try to see to it that that person was joined with me. And so it became dark, and overnighted there in one of their grass huts. And the next day I said, I have to get out of here before other people know that I'm here, mostly the Japanese. So they said that they would do their best to arrange it. They may have to hand me off to other people. And we had a little difficult time. Wow. Now I'm going to back up again. Everybody that flew had a ground job. My ground job was provost marshal. I was acting provost marshal. So I got to learn a lot more than most of the guys did about the local language, because I was dealing with the local population. And I was given a troop of Gurkhas. These are the hill people, the Indians, you know, that have the cookery. That cookery is made of spring steel that they hand hammer into it's the strongest metal knife type of thing I've ever seen. So, since I had a little better communication, we could get along. And so they started this process to try to get me out, because it was actually, there weren't defined front lines, but we were in an area that was populated by the Japanese, where they were there. And they, of course, knew that my ship had blown up. It wasn't a big secret to anybody. And they were looking for us. And the natives told me that. So we would travel at night, and they would take me to village to village to village, and frequently would exchange crews of people that would be moving me forward, because one crew would want to go back home and the other would take over. We kept going.
Traveling mostly over land, I assume you got out of the water? Or
No, we're mostly over water.
Dugouts, okay.
Mostly over water until we hit into land. And that's when the whole thing got sticky, got dangerous. And we moved at night. I had training when I first got there from the RAF. And they put me through their survival school. And that really played a big role in saving my life. And I made a point of thanking them, the RAF, which later I rescued an RAF crew, so they thanked me. I went to ASSE Rescue after all of this experience. When you went on a combat mission, air crew was given a canvas belt with 100 rupees, pure silver, sewn into it. And everybody got one of these belts. And the natives were a little suspicious of white men, so whenever they would see money, they'd bite it. And if it gave a little bit, they knew it was real silver. And if it was the normal coin, it had less of a tendency. It was harder. So somebody had the foresight to strike off, or have struck off, these rupees, which, by the way, were worth then about 30 cents. I wouldn't be surprised if it...
You call them what again?
Rupees, R-U-P-E...
R-U-P-I-E-S?
E-E-S,
E-E-S.
I think. Anyway, they brought me into this land, and then a land crew took over. And these guys stuck with me until I got out. And we traveled mostly at night. We traveled down a bunch of narrow paths. We had occasion to hear Japanese voices, but stayed quiet till they could hear them no more. Anyway, we weren't challenged in any way. We had a general knowledge of where we were going. We had a silk map that was in our parachute pack. And although it was a map of a great deal of area with not too much detail, and I think it was around the 10th day, thereabouts, a plane, a B-24, spotted me. I spotted them, they spotted me. And
so where were you? An open area, obviously.
yeah, well, you'd go trooping through areas. Some would be...
So you're walking
We're walking.
See it.
We're walking the whole way at this
How
point.
high were they?
Huh?
How high was the plane?
I don't know. They weren't too
It
high.
couldn't have been very high.
No, they spotted me and then they came down lower. And the chief navigator for the squadron wrote on a map, a paper map. He wrote, you are here, go to here, which was a railroad. He says, and that's the beginning of that road. You pick that up and it'll take you in. And such cute remarks like keep your legs crossed. Stupid, but anyway, I still have that map. Huh? Oh, yeah, well, that was, right, that was the seventh day. We were given the right to go out and look for our people that were shot down for 7 days. If at the end of the seventh day you weren't found, they wouldn't stop looking for you, but your squadron couldn't spend any more time or gasoline or on the project. So this was the seventh day when they spotted me. And my wife's been urging me to write a book and entitle it The Seventh Day. Maybe someday I'll do that. Anyway, they did spot me, and they dropped the map, and I now knew where to go, and my guys, and we all went to the right place. And when we got there, I had each of them sign their name on a slip of paper. And I took my belt off, and I gave them 99 of these rupees and kept one. And I still have that one. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I was president of the Kiwanis of Old Town, San Diego, and I had we would annually do a fair. And one of the guys in the fair cuts out coins. You've probably seen where they bas relief cut out well, anyway, cut out this coin, and I still have it. So we came back, and I had a number of experience of malaria.
Now, you got to the railroad. You followed the railroad. Did you catch a train or just
Yeah,
walk along the railroad?
I walked until I came to the station, and then I sat down and waited. Because I was told by the people in the station that there would be a train that comes down in there and go back up.
Okay, so where did it go? Heading over into Indy then? Or what?
Yeah. It brought me to I don't remember. Huh? It brought me to a larger community, at which point I could get and did get public transportation to take me to a main city, at which point I could get back to my base. And I went through a rest period.
Now, were you wearing the same clothes the entire time, or did the natives give you some clothes to wear? Or?
They gave me sandals. I gotten rid of my shoes and kicked them off, and it was nasty walking without them. So they gave me a pair of sandals. And I turned their names in when I got back to base in hopes that they would get a further reward from our government. I don't know if they did or not. They seemed to feel grateful, and I was grateful for them, what they did. I spent some time in the hospital then. I had numerous times of malaria, the repetitive kind, and amoebic dysentery. I would have eaten on this trip anything anybody else ate, and my constitution wasn't really set up to do that. So I was put in the hospital, and interesting thing. The operations officer visited me in the hospital, and they put a Purple Heart on my pillow, and I never got orders. So I never got the Purple Heart. But, you know, it's a medal by accident. Nobody goes after that medal anyway. So I was happy to just be alive. So I got better. And at this time, there was a call for the air sea rescue. So I went back down to Calcutta. And the Brits were doing the air sea rescue at the time. They had an amphibian, and it wasn't in terribly good shape. And my planes were brought back to me now from South Africa. So I was in good shape. I mean, the planes were in good shape. I wasn't terribly. And I had performed a couple of rescues that were needed. The first B-29 that was shot down in our theater, I picked up that crew and landed in the water and picked them up. And if I still had single hull, I would have joined them rather than picking them up.
Did all of them make it?
Yeah. Yes. Actually, they landed in the Sundarbans. That's the part water and part sand at the mouth of the Ganges. They were coming back from a mission. They couldn't make it all the way. They got and did a belly landing there. They were all in good shape. Nobody got hurt. But they just need to get out of there.
So that was the first rescue.
Yeah, and then the Brits had a medium bomber that went down, the RAF, and I was very fortunate in being able to go down and pick those fellas up. They too didn't suffer anything other than having to make the belly landing in the water.
Apparently that was a better way to go down than just jumping out over a rice paddy.
Well, you know, you don't always have that option. If, let's say, you're flying and you're coming back home and you're beaten up, you keep struggling in hopes that you're going to get there and stretch out the getting there, even if you're only flying on 2 engines. And then, yes, it is a better option for a lot of people to you know, do a belly up thing than to jump.
Now, do you want to go back and fly combat? Opposed to the rescue thing, or
I didn't have that option, really. I was pretty knocked up at the time, and they flew everybody because we were so short on everything. I mean, our organizations were minimal. Our assets were minimal. The number of trained personnel was so thin that senior commanders in many cases flew missions that normally in some of the other theaters wouldn't do that. So I came home. I had been knocked up in a few different places in my body, so that when I came back, I was sent to the...
Like, tell me how, where?
Well, first of all, when I was down and missing, they notified my mother that I was missing in action. They didn't notify her when I was found. So, and I found this out not right away. By then, I was down in Calcutta, where my air sea rescue was put in the defense airfield for Calcutta, not Dum Dum, which was a big international airport. And there was a British commander of that airport. I was given a brevet rank to match his because I took over command of that defense of Calcutta Air Base. And I ran my assay rescue out of there. And the Brits had RAF had I think maybe 2 fighter squadrons were there at the time for the defense of Calcutta. Anyway, then I got home. I weighed under 100 pounds. Yeah.
How tall are you?
6'1".
Talk about a 90-pound weakling, huh? Wow.
Yeah.
Did you tell them what they did after you came off your runs? All that stuff you did?
The booze?
Yeah.
I told them all about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, that was their way of debriefing everybody and seeing, you know, what happened and what did you see and, you know,
And so you were still sick.
Yeah.
The reason is that you were still 90 pounds. So you were struggling off and on with the malaria and dysentery.
As a matter of fact, what happened, I came through North Africa on air transport, and my legs were banged up, so I was on crutches. And then when I got to...
How'd they get banged up?
well, I forgot to tell you that when I hit my head, I also smacked my ankle, my right ankle, and kept walking on it. It was swollen and it was a mess. So they had to hospitalize me to try to get that down. And finally, I guess the people in Calcutta decided I'd be better treated at home, and I agreed with them. And so they bundled me off, gave me, put all my effects in a footlocker, and arranged for its transport, and put me on an airplane to go home.
Now, how long after you had you were rescued, and you were in Calcutta doing your air sea rescue in the defense of Calcutta, how long between then and the time you went home?
I would say about 4 months. About 4 months after I'd gotten back, and I was only off duty for probably around 4 days, 5 days. More than me. I mean, practically everybody that could be ambulatory was flying combat. I mean, we just didn't, we couldn't spare anybody. So certain key positions, of which pilot is one, were required to use whatever facilities you could. So you weren't able to treat yourself too well. You just had to do it. So we got on that airplane to come home, and finally, I'm trying to remember where it was. I think it was Algiers. No, it wasn't. I went up north through England and flew into LaGuardia Airport.
So when did you hit England?
In this trip.
About when is this? When are you coming home?
1945, maybe.
Okay, 45. So
Yeah.
the invasion has already happened. And,
Oh yeah,
gliding across.
the invasion had happened, and
Flying north behind enemy lines.
well, no, actually,
Because by December of 44, you know, they're at Belgium.
yeah,
They
right.
can fly over.
I wasn't at risk on that. I'm trying to, I seem to recall flying into, was it Scotland or Ireland? I'm just trying to remember, but I missed all of that. I didn't, we bypassed all of that. And I came across into Greenland, Iceland, Canada, Goose Bay, I think it was, and then down into LaGuardia Field, at which point that's where I swapped right. I was still using the crutches until I got to LaGuardia, and the Red Cross took the crutches and gave me some canes. So I didn't want to go home with. Huh? Yeah, well, yeah, well, in each leg of coming home, I would have to get out of that airplane and stay down for a day or two. Couldn't fly anymore, and wait for the next one to come. And what Judy's reminding me of is in Tripoli, they took me into town, a beautiful place, loads of date palms and dry. I'd come from India where it was, humidity was, very, very high. And it was just a pleasant place as far as I was concerned until you'd be downwind of a camel train. You could know that they're coming long before you could see them. Yeah, kind of strong.
How many camels would be in a camel train?
Oh, I don't know, 3 or 4 camels be trooping along there, but my God, they do smell.
Okay, so you get home and then...
I get home and, I forgot to tell you that when I had gotten to Calcutta, I called my mother on the phone. I found out from headquarters that they had reported me missing, but I also found out they didn't unreport me, that I was, back. So I figured my mother's sitting there with a MIA in her hand. So I got on the phone and made a commercial call, and I was damned, went through. I was shocked, but it did. She said, "Who?" So I told her I was back and everything was okay. And that was it. I took a cab with a couple of guys, dropped one off, and I think one dropped me off at my home. And within 24 hours, I was back in the hospital at Governor's Island in New York. They sent an ambulance for me. I had another malaria attack. And so they took me over there and made me feel better, and I came back home. And then I would report to Mitchell Field, which was a gathering place. And they sent me into the hospital, and the doctor says, "Hey, listen, you got enough physical problems that we could retire you at a physical disability." What I forgot to tell you was that while I was overseas, General Davidson made me a regular Army officer instead of a reservist. And that worked to it never meant anything to me other than when I went back and they said to me, "Look, you can take a retirement if you want on physical disability." I said, "I want." And so they said, "Well, we'll try to make you better first." And they put me on orders. I went down first to Atlantic City, where they did a reassignment center. And they decided to send me to a hospital in the Midwest somewhere. And I said, "Listen, I've been away years now. It's silly. Why don't you just let me go to the local hospital here?" And I was persuasive. I kind of lost my temper, actually, but I was persuasive. And I didn't see the value of sending me off to another place where my family couldn't even visit me. So they put me in the hospital locally. did what they needed to do, sent me up to the Pauling School for Boys, which was taken over by the Army Air Corps as a rest and recuperation center. And I went through debriefings up there and rest and recuperation. And finally, my retirement papers came through, and that was it.